A cold wind moved across the forgotten moon, carrying dust across the ruined stone paths that had once been part of an ancient Valorian temple. The sky above was always dark here, touched only by a distant blue star that barely gave light. For centuries, no footsteps had echoed in this place. No voice had disturbed the silence. No living soul had dared to return. But tonight, she returned. Alara stood at the entrance of the temple, her cloak trembling in the wind. She had not been here for more than 400 years, yet everything inside her remembered this place. The tall, broken pillars, the glowing marks on the stone, the faint pulse deep underground, like a sleeping heart waiting to wake. She placed her hand against the cold surface of the ancient wall and closed her eyes. She had spent centuries fighting, hiding, traveling, hoping. But all those long years were leading back to this moment. She whispered softly, "Kale, I hope I am not too late." Alara stepped inside the temple, her boots brushing aside dust that had been building up for generations. The long hallway was quiet, except for the distant hum of ancient stasis energy. She walked deeper, passing symbols carved by ancestors long gone. Her people, the Valorians, lived far longer than humans, some for 5 or 6 centuries. But even for her, these halls felt old. Older than memory, older than history. She had been very young the last time she came here. Young, scared, and desperate to save him. Kale Ryan, the human warrior who had changed her life. Her fingers tightened around her cloak as she remembered the day she carried him here. His armor broken, his body covered in burns from the Great Rift War, his pulse slow, but alive. He had saved her people when no one else would. Everyone thought he had died fighting the Reclaimers, an emotionless enemy that destroyed worlds without hesitation. But Alara refused to accept his death. There had been hope left in him, so she placed him in the hidden stasis chamber, trusting the ancient technology to protect him until a safer time. But there had never been a safer time. The Reclaimers had returned, stronger than ever. Alara had been running from them for months now. She had watched colony after colony fall. She had heard countless distress calls. She had seen entire fleets burned out in the void. Every time she tried to protect someone, she felt the same echo of fear that had lived inside her centuries ago. Tonight, that fear grew stronger. A deep rumble shook the temple walls. Dust fell from the ceiling, and Alara lifted her head sharply. She recognized that sound. A Reclaimer cruiser entering the moon's atmosphere. They had tracked her. They had followed her trail all the way here. She hurried down the last steps, her heart pounding. She reached the end of the hallway, where a round door, sealed by ancient patterns, stood untouched for centuries. The blue crystal in the center still glowed faintly. Alara placed both hands on it. The crystal warmed under her touch, recognizing the same signature it had felt all those years ago. The stone door slid open. Inside, the chamber glowed with soft blue light. The air felt still, like nothing inside had moved for hundreds of years. At the center of the room stood the stasis pod, an oval cradle made of silver-white metal with long lines of ancient technology running across its surface. Blue energy pulsed inside like a heartbeat trapped in time. And inside the pod, lying peacefully, was Kale. Alara felt her breath catch. Even after centuries, he looked exactly the same. His dark hair, his strong features, the calm expression on his face. He looked only moments asleep, not frozen in time. She stepped closer and brushed her trembling finger near the transparent surface, not touching him but close enough to feel the coldness through the barrier. "You slept while the galaxy changed," she whispered. "You missed everything. You missed the rise and fall of empires. You missed stars being born and dying. You missed all the years I hoped you would open your eyes again." No. She closed her eyes for a moment. She had always believed he would return. She had held on to that belief through every lonely century. Through battles, near-death escapes, and days when hope felt like a weight she could barely carry. Another thunderous boom shook the temple. The ground trembled. This time, the echo was stronger. Alara flinched and looked up. Dust fell in thicker clouds from the ceiling. The reclaimers were landing on the moon. Their scanners would soon detect energy signatures. They would find the temple. They would find the chamber. And if they found Kale, they would destroy him before he could take a single breath. She moved quickly to the control panel beside the stasis pod. Her hands shook slightly, but she worked with the speed of someone who had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in her mind. The pod lights brightened. The energy pulse changed rhythm. Blue light flickered around the chamber. Alara placed her hand flat on the crystal at the center of the pod and whispered, "Kale, please wake up. We don't have time." The pod shuddered. A deep hum filled the room. The energy field began to dissolve, slowly revealing more details of Kale's form. His eyes moved faintly beneath his eyelids, his fingers twitching slightly. It was the first sign of life he had shown in 4 centuries. Alara felt tears gather in her eyes, but she forced herself to stay focused. "Come back, Kale. The galaxy needs you again." The temple shook so violently that she nearly lost her balance. The vibration traveled through the floor like a living shockwave. She heard distant metallic noises, reclaimer drones breaking through the outer walls. She leaned over him urgently. "Kale, listen to me," she said, her voice breaking. "They're almost here. I need you to wake up now." The pod lights flashed brighter. Kale's breathing deepened. His heartbeat, silent for centuries, now echoed through the chamber, with slow, heavy thumps. A faint mist escaped the pod's edges as the ancient cooling systems deactivated. Alara backed up slightly, giving him space, watching with hope and fear mixed together. Kale's eyes opened. Not slowly. Not weakly. They snapped open with the instinct of a warrior who had spent his entire life waking in danger. His chest rose sharply as he gasped for air. His muscles tensed as if expecting a fight the second he stood up. Alara couldn't stop the heavy breath she released. "Kale." His eyes darted around, confused. He was breathing hard, disoriented. Finally, his gaze found hers. His brows knitted together. "Alara?" His voice was rough, like stone cracking after ages of silence. He tried to sit up, but his limbs were stiff. Alara quickly stepped forward, helping him steady himself without forcing him. He blinked several times, trying to understand what had happened. "How long?" he managed to ask. Alara swallowed. 412 years. Kale stared at her. His expression shifted slowly, shock, confusion, disbelief. He touched his own chest, as if expecting the answer to feel wrong. His gaze returned to her, searching her face for clarity, for truth. She still looked familiar, but also older, changed by time and experience. He whispered, "Why? Why would you keep me here so long?" "Any." Alara took a deep breath, her voice soft but steady. "Because the war wasn't over. Because I knew they would come back. And because I knew one day I would need you again." The ground roared with another explosion. Alara and Kale both looked up. The noise was closer, much closer. Kale, still weak but alert, slowly pushed himself upright. "The reclaimers," she said. "They followed me here. If they find you, they will destroy you before you can recover." Kale steadied himself, adjusting to the weight of his own body after centuries of stillness. His legs trembled, but his eyes hardened, with the same determination she remembered. "Then we don't let them." Alara stepped to his side to support him as he stood. He accepted her arm without protest, leaning on her just enough to keep balance. He glanced around the chamber, recognizing the old technology. You kept me alive all this time?" "Yes," she said quietly. "I couldn't let the galaxy lose you." He met her eyes, and something warm flickered between them, gratitude and trust, built on a past he barely remembered, but she had carried for centuries. The ceiling cracked loudly, sending down heavy pieces of stone. Alara tightened her grip on his arm. "Kale, we have to go. Now." He nodded once. His voice was soft but firm. "Lead the way." Alara helped him toward the exit as the temple walls trembled, knowing this time she was not protecting him alone. He was awake, and the galaxy was about to change again. Kale leaned on Alara as they hurried up the long stone corridor, his steps unsteady but growing stronger with each movement. His muscles felt tight, like they belonged to a statue instead of a living man. But instinct pushed him forward. A warrior's mind never truly slept, even when his body had been frozen for centuries. The ground shook again, harder this time. Dust rained from the ceiling in thick clouds. Far behind them, metallic footsteps echoed slow, heavy, and too precise to be anything other than reclaimer drones. Alara glanced back with sharp eyes. "They've entered the temple," she whispered. Her voice was calm, but Kael could hear the alarm beneath it. "How many?" he asked, forcing strength into his legs. "Too many. A full tracking squad." She tightened her hold on him. "They came for me, but if they see you, they'll call a purge unit." Kael didn't need an explanation. Purge units didn't take prisoners. They destroyed anything with a heartbeat. He took a slow breath. The air felt strange, thin, and cold, but it filled his lungs with new energy. "We need to outrun them." "We will," Alara said, though her expression showed worry. "I planned an escape route, but we need to move fast." They reached the staircase leading toward the surface. The stone was cracked and partially collapsed. Kael eyed the damage. "This didn't look like this before." Alara shook her head. "This moon has been abandoned too long. The ground here is unstable. The temple has been breaking apart for decades." A sudden rumble rolled through the structure, as if the moon itself was warning them to leave. Kael gritted his teeth. "Then we climb." He pushed off from her gently, trying to take more of his own weight. His legs wobbled, but he refused to fall. Step by step, he took the first few stairs. Alara stayed close, ready to catch him but not interfering unless he needed it. "Your strength will return," she said, watching him carefully. "The stasis kept your body alive, but your muscles, they will need time." Kael nodded without looking back. "Time we don't have." Metal scraped against stone somewhere far behind them. Reclaimer claws dragging along the ground as they searched through the temple. The sound grew louder. Closer. Kael forced his pace faster. Alara moved beside him, guiding him around fallen pillars and chunks of broken ceiling. At the top of the staircase, a narrow hallway opened into a large, round chamber. Faded murals covered the walls, depicting ancient Valorian guardians standing beside human warriors. Kael paused for a heartbeat, recognizing one image, his own silhouette engraved in stone. Alara saw his reaction. "My ancestors carved that after the Great Rift War. They believed you would return one day." He touched the wall gently, the memory of battle flashing through his mind, shattered ships, burning skies, the screams of the innocent. It felt like yesterday to him. Though centuries had passed, he lowered his hand. "Looks like I kept them waiting too long." Alara gave him a small, sad smile. "Not too long, just long enough." Before Kael could respond, a sharp mechanical shriek cut through the chamber. A single red light glowed through the dust at the far end of the hallway. A drone had found them. Alara reacted instantly. "Move." She took Kael's arm and pulled him toward the exit. He didn't argue. Even weakened, he knew one drone could become 10 within minutes. The drone launched a burst of metal projectiles, but the unstable ground swallowed most of them as walls cracked under the impact. Alara raised her wrist device, emitting a sharp pulse that disrupted the drone's sensors. It staggered, confused for a moment. "That won't hold it for long," she said. "Keep going." They sprinted through another set of corridors, turning corners quickly. Kale kept pace better now, finding rhythm in his movements. "How far to the surface?" he asked. "Almost there." A blast shook the entire temple, throwing both of them off balance. Kale stumbled, but Ailara caught him by the arm and steadied him. "What was that?" "The reclaimer ship landed," she answered. "They're deploying heavy units." They reached the final passage, long, narrow, with small shafts of dim, blue-tinted light shining from surface cracks. Ailara guided him to the end, where a half-collapsed stone barrier blocked their path. Kale frowned. "It's sealed." "It wasn't last time," Ailara said, frustration breaking into her voice. "The moonquake must have shifted the structure." He examined the rocks. His strength still wasn't fully back, but something inside him stirred. Old training. Old discipline. Old courage. He placed both hands on the largest stone. "Stand back." Ailara opened her mouth to protest, but she stepped away anyway. Kale closed his eyes for a second, breathing deep. Memories rushed through him, lifting battlefield debris, pulling comrades from collapsed ruins, pushing ships off damaged launch pads. He had always been strong, but more important than strength was will. He pushed. The first attempt barely moved the stone. Ailara watched silently, worry tightening her features. Kale pushed again, harder. A crack formed near the top. He set his jaw, summoning strength from a part of himself he thought he had lost over centuries of stillness. His arms trembled, his muscles burned. But the stone shifted. One more push. A final burst of effort. The rocks snapped loose, tumbling outward with a heavy crash. Blue light flooded into the passage as the surface entrance opened. Cold wind rushed in, carrying the sound of distant engines. Ailara stepped forward in surprise. "Kale, you did it." He breathed hard. "I told you." No time. They climbed out of the passage onto the moon's barren surface. A large crater stretched before them, filled with swirling dust. Above, the sky was nearly black except for the faint glow of the distant blue star. And there, hovering like a monster of metal, was the reclaimer ship. Its underside glowed faint red, scanning the area. Long mechanical legs lowered toward the ground, preparing to deploy more drones. Ailara quickly guided Kyle toward a small ridge where a slender craft was hidden under a camouflage net of moon dust and reflective cloth. The craft was old, but well-maintained, a fast scout ship with 2 seats. Kale stared at it. "Yours?" "Mine," she said, "and the fastest thing we have." They reached the craft, but footsteps echoed behind them, multiple drones emerging from the temple entrance. Their glowing red eyes swept across the moon's surface, locking on Kale and Ailara's heat signatures. Ailara started the ship's engine. The machine hummed faintly. She opened the cockpit. "Get in." Kale climbed in with her help, securing himself in the back seat. She jumped into the front, activating the launch sequence. The drones charged toward them, running fast across the rocky ground. Ailara pulled a lever. The ship blasted upward, dust exploding beneath it as they shot into the air. Kyle looked down at the temple, the place he had slept for 400 years, growing smaller and smaller. The drones fired upward. But Ailara tilted the craft sharply, dodging the projectiles with impressive skill. "They won't stop," she said, her voice steady but pressured. "They'll chase us until they destroy us." Kale tightened the straps around his chest. "Then we don't let them catch us." Ailara's fingers danced across the control panel. "There's a canyon nearby. If we fly low enough, we can break their lock." The reclaimer ship above them stirred, lights focusing like an unblinking eye. Kale stared at it. "That's not just a cruiser. That's a hunter class." "Cruiser," Ailara nodded grimly. "They sent their best. They want us gone." The scout ship dived into the canyon, weaving between sharp rock walls. The drones followed, but the narrow passages forced them into a single-file chase. Alara maneuvered with expert precision, scraping dangerously close to the canyon edges. "You've been flying for 4 centuries?" Kale asked. "In a way," she replied. "Many battles, many escapes." Kale watched her for a moment. There was calm determination in her face, strength he had never seen before. She had grown, changed, survived countless hardships, entirely alone. The ship finally burst out of the canyon and into open air. Alara hit the booster, sending them streaking across the moon's horizon. The reclaimer ship shrank behind them. The drones slowed, losing track. After a long minute of silence, Alara let out a breath she had been holding. "We're clear, for now." Kale leaned back, exhausted but awake in a way he hadn't felt since the war. "Where are we going?" Alara looked forward, her voice soft but steady. "To my fleet. To the last hope we have left." Kale nodded slowly. His strength was returning. His mind was clearing. His purpose was forming. He was awake now, and the galaxy was calling him back. The small scout ship cut through the darkness of space, leaving the broken moon far behind. Kale sat quietly in the back seat, watching distant stars blur into thin silver lines. Alara piloted with steady hands, guiding the ship through debris fields and drifting rocks that danced unseen in the void. The silence inside the cockpit felt heavy, but not uncomfortable. It was the silence of 2 people trying to understand the weight of the moment. Kale finally spoke, his voice still rough from centuries of sleep. Alara's eyes stayed on the controls, hidden in the veiled expanse. A place where scanners fail and gravity behaves strangely. The reclaimers avoid it. Too unpredictable. Kale nodded slowly. "A smart place to hide." "Not forever," she said softly. Kale studied her reflection in the cockpit glass. She was older than when he last saw her, older in the way only a long-lived species showed age. Her face held more strength, more scars, more experience. But her eyes were the same ones he remembered. "You fought alone all this time?" he asked. Alara shook her head gently. "Not alone. I fought with many. But they came and went. You were the one constant, always in the back of my mind. Always the hope I carried." Kyle felt something twist inside him, not sadness, not guilt, but a strange mix of gratitude and disbelief. "You shouldn't have carried that alone." Her voice softened. "I chose to." The ship entered a thick region of swirling fog, cosmic dust that glowed faintly blue. Kale leaned forward slightly. "What is this?" "The veil," Alara answered. "The entrance." The fog shifted around them in unnatural patterns. Stars disappeared. Gravity tugged in strange directions, pulling the ship slightly off course. Alara adjusted the controls carefully, keeping her eyes sharp. "This region used to be part of a large nebula," she explained. "Long ago, when the reclaimers first rose, my people built hidden passages inside the nebula. Now the nebula has thinned, but the passages still exist. If you know the route, you can enter safely." "And if you don't?" Kale asked. Alara glanced at him. "You vanish into the veil and never come out." Kale nodded quietly. "Then I trust you know the path." Her lips curved into a tiny smile. "I've flown it 1,000 times." The ship drifted deeper into the veil. Strange lights flickered outside like ghostly shapes moving through mist. Kyle could feel the odd pull of the region, like invisible currents of air pushing the craft left and right. After several minutes, Alara guided the ship through a narrow opening between 2 massive rocks. The fog thinned suddenly. Stars reappeared. And then Kale saw it. Dozens of ships, large and small, old and new, hovered together in a calm region of space. Some were elegant Valorian vessels shaped like smooth wings. Others were box-shaped human freighters, modified with armor plates. A few were patched together refugee ships that looked like they had been repaired more times than they had flown safely. But every ship was alive with activity, lights blinking, engines humming, people working on the exterior hulls. It was a scattered fleet, but a determined one. Alara exhaled. Home. As their craft approached, a transmission crackled through the speakers. A deep voice spoke, in a calm, controlled tone. Scout Vessel Aurelia 3. Identify yourself. Alara replied. Alara Valori, returning with priority cargo. Kale raised an eyebrow. Priority? Cargo? She smirked. The fleet parted slowly, giving their ship a safe corridor. As they passed, Kyle saw faces watching from windows. Alien faces of many shapes and colors. And a few human ones, too. Some eyes widened in shock when they saw him. Others whispered excitedly. Alara landed her ship on a docking platform of the largest vessel. A long, elegant flagship, shaped like a silver crescent. When the cockpit opened, fresh, filtered air rushed in. Alara stepped out first. Kale followed carefully. His legs felt more stable now. The stasis effects were fading. A group of officers approached 3 Valorians and 1 human woman with dark hair tied behind her head. That can't be, she whispered. Is it really him? Alara nodded. Yes. The officers stared at KL like they were seeing a ghost. The eldest Valorian, a tall figure with silver markings on his skin, stepped forward and bowed slightly. Kale Ryan, he said. The legend of the First Rift. We thought your story was only a myth. Kale gave a respectful nod. I'm no myth. Just a soldier who slept too long. The officers exchanged glances, stunned by the reality of him standing there. The human officer stepped forward. I'm Captain Mira Holt. My grandmother told me stories about you. She said you were the one who stopped the Reclaimer advance 500 years ago. She used to say that, if you ever returned, the galaxy would have a chance again. Kael felt the weight of her words but chose humility. A single man can't win a war. But he can help. Alara spoke gently. He's still recovering, but his mind is clear. And he remembers everything we need. The officers nodded with hopeful expressions. They guided Kael and Alara through the ship's corridors. Everywhere they walked, people whispered. Soldiers paused mid-march. Engineers lifted their heads. Some bowed in respect. Others simply stared, unable to hide their awe. Kael was uncomfortable with it. But he understood. In a galaxy filled with fear, hope was rare. And sometimes people placed that hope in a single figure, even if he didn't ask for it. They entered a war room with a holographic table at the center. Blue light projected maps of star systems, highlighted routes, and glowing red threats. The officers gathered around, and Alara motioned Kael to stand beside her. This is what the galaxy looks like now, she said quietly. Kael studied the map. Many regions were marked red Reclaimer territory. Others were yellow contested zones. Only small clusters remained green. This is worse than I expected, Kael admitted. The silver-marked Valorian officer pointed to a rotating symbol on the map. The Reclaimers have created new factories. They grow faster than any alliance can fight. Endry. The Rateharment, Captain Mira added. We've been losing ground every month. Without a new strategy, the remaining free worlds won't last. Kael listened carefully. Show me their core route, their supply chain, their movements. Alara pressed a button. Lines appeared across the hologram, thin red paths connecting Reclaimer strongholds. Kael frowned. This isn't random. They're not expanding outward. They're circling. The officers looked confused. Circling? Mira asked. Kael nodded. It's a pattern. A cycle. They're preparing to collapse the circle inward. When they do, Every remaining world inside this ring will fall in days, not months. Silence filled the room. Fear flickered in every face. Alara looked at Kael. You fought them before. You understood their thinking. Yes, he said. Because I studied the patterns for years. They're not just machines. They follow ancient instincts. Ancient? Mira asked. Kael nodded. I learned something in the past, wore something I kept secret until the end. The Reclaimers aren't simply machines built for war. They're echoes. Memories of a lost civilization trying to maintain control by wiping anything they see as a threat. Alara stiffened slightly. You never told me that. You had enough to carry, he replied. Mira crossed her arms. If they are following a cycle again, can we break it? Kael stepped forward. Resting his hands on the holographic table, he traced a line across the red circle. There's a weak point. The Maw Core. Quote. Alara's breath caught. That place? We always avoided it. Too dangerous. It's dangerous because it's the brain, Kael said. If we strike there before the cycle collapses, we can break their entire command network. Their drones will lose coordination. Their factories will stop receiving orders. The officers exchanged looks, fear, hope, uncertainty. Mira asked. But you're saying we have to attack the strongest part of their empire, with the weakest fleet we've ever had. Kael smiled faintly. Yes. Alara raised an eyebrow. You sound too calm about that. Kael shrugged. Maybe because I've done impossible things before. A quiet laugh broke out across the room, nervous but real. Alara looked at Kael, her expression softening. Kael flexed his hands. I'm getting stronger every hour. Mira studied him. Your mind is sharp. Your instincts are alive. We need your leadership. Kael didn't answer immediately. He looked at the map again. At the red circle closing on innocent worlds. Then, he looked at Alara, the one person who had carried hope for him across centuries. Finally, he spoke. I'll help. I'll train. I'll fight. And we'll end this cycle together. Alara nodded, relief and determination shining in her eyes. Then we'll begin at once. Kael turned toward the officers, standing tall. His strength returning not just to his limbs but to his spirit. The legend had returned. And the war was about to change. The fleet floated in silence around the veiled expanse as Kael stepped into the training hall, the place where warriors of many species prepared for battle. The room was wide and bright, filled with practice weapons, movable platforms, and holographic targets. Alara walked beside him, keeping a steady pace, watching him carefully, as if she expected him to collapse at any moment. But Kael felt stronger than he had since awakening. His strength grew each hour, like his body was remembering itself piece by piece. A group of soldiers stopped what they were doing the moment they saw him. Some stood straighter. Some bowed slightly, and others whispered excitedly. Kael pretended not to notice. Though he felt the weight of their hope, Alara stepped closer to him. You don't need to impress them, she said gently. Just take it slow. Kael shook his head lightly. Slow won't save anyone. We need to be ready before they strike again. She sighed, not angry, only worried. I know. But you've been awake for only one day. Kael looked at her with steady eyes. You kept me alive for 4 centuries. I won't waste a single minute. And like seeing, I makes Prima. Alara didn't argue. She simply nodded and activated the training panel. A holographic projection formed around Kael, moving shapes that represented Reclaimer drones. Their motions were fast and sharp. Kael's instincts sharpened immediately. He grabbed a practice staff and took a stance, his body reacting from old memory. A drone shape charged. Kael spun the staff, blocking the attack and countering with precision. He moved through the projected enemies smoothly, his breathing steady, his muscles loosening with each strike. Dozens of figures tried to surround him, but he slipped between them, striking with controlled power. The soldiers watching were silent, stunned. Kale didn't notice them. He only felt the fight. Alara watched with mixed emotion, pride, concern, and quiet admiration. He was the same warrior she had known long ago, but something felt different. Stronger. Sharper. As if centuries of sleep hadn't weakened him but instead stored energy that now flooded through him like fire. When the final hologram faded, Kale stood still, breathing calmly. He looked toward Alara. "How long until the fleet is ready?" She checked her device. "We can move by the next cycle. Many ships are damaged, but engineers are working fast. They know this might be the last chance." Kale walked to her, wiping sweat from his brow. "Then, let's prepare the plan." They left the training hall and entered the command center where the officers waited. The holographic map glowed brighter today, updated with new data. The red circle of reclaimer territory tightened slowly, like a closing trap around the remaining free worlds. Captain Mira Holt approached Kale immediately. "Our scouts confirm the Maw Corps is heavily guarded. If we attack, we'll be outnumbered." Kale didn't hesitate. "We don't need numbers. We need strategy." The silver-marked Valorian officer nodded. "We're listening." Kale pointed at the hologram. "The Maw Corps is shielded. If we attack from the front, we will fail. But there's a weakness here on the dark side." Alara narrowed her eyes. "Dark side?" He magnified a particular region. A swirling mass of gravitational storms surrounded part of the Maw Corps. "This area is unstable. Even reclaimer ships avoid it because their sensors malfunction in the storm." Mira frowned. "But if their sensors fail, ours will too." Kale nodded. "Yes. But the difference is that we can use that. They avoid the storm, therefore they don't guard it." Alara finally understood. "You want to take the fleet through the storm?" Kale turned to her. "It's the only path they won't expect." The room fell silent. The plan was dangerous, very dangerous. But the officers looked at one another and slowly nodded. Dangerous or not, it was their best chance. The preparations began immediately. Mechanics repaired engines. Scientists adjusted shields. Pilots studied storm maps. Soldiers trained harder. The entire fleet pulsed with new purpose. Later, as the ships prepared to depart, Kale stood at a large viewing window, watching the stars drift past. Alara approached quietly. "You're thinking again," she said softly. Kale smiled faintly. "I never stopped." She stepped closer. "Are you ready for this?" "No," Kale said. "But I'll fight anyway." Alara let out a small breath. "You haven't changed." Kale looked at her, then really looked at her. "And you carried hope for 400 years. That's harder than anything I've ever done." Alara's expression softened. "I carried you because you gave us hope when we had none. I believed you'd come back." Kale held her gaze a moment longer before turning back to the window. "Then, let's make that belief worth something." Moments later, alarms echoed gently around the ship, not warnings, but signals of launch. The fleet was ready. Alara led Kale to the command deck, where dozens of officers waited. The flagship engines hummed as the ship turned toward the edge of the veiled expanse. Kale stood at the center, his eyes locked on the stars. "Begin the jump," he said calmly. Alara gave the command. "All ships, follow the flagship. Enter the storm corridor." The fleet moved as one. They left the expanse, engines glowing bright as they entered the gravitational storm. Space twisted around them. Gravity pulled in strange directions. The ships rattled as cosmic forces pushed and tugged at them. Lights flickered, alarms blipped. But the fleet stayed on course, trusting Alara's guidance and Kale's strategy. The storm lasted long minutes, but eventually the turbulence faded. The darkness ahead shifted. Then they saw it. The Maw Corps. A massive fortress floating in the void, black, jagged, alive with red lines of energy. It looked like a wounded star frozen in metal. Around it hovered hundreds of reclaimer ships, but none guarded the dark side entrance. Just as Kale predicted. "Take us in," Kale said. The fleet surged forward, emerging silently from the storm. They approached the fortress with engines dimmed, shields low, disguising their signatures. Kale stared at the Maw core, memories of the past war flashing in his mind, the screams, the destruction, the near end of everything. This time, they had one chance. The first strike came from the flagship, an energy bolt aimed at the weak point of the core's outer shell. The blast rocked the fortress, and alarms lit the red sky around it. The reclaimers turned immediately, thousands of mechanical eyes locking onto the attacking fleet. The battle began. Explosions lit the darkness. Reclaimer drones swarmed toward the ships. KL gripped the railing as the flagship shook under enemy fire. Alara gave orders quickly, guiding the fleet around the fortress, weaving between laser fire and metal debris. Human pilots dodged enemy missiles. Valorian ships cut through drone formations with sharp, precise maneuvers. Kale watched everything, reading the battlefield, understanding patterns even in chaos. "They're adapting," he said. "They're forming a new cycle." Alara nodded. "We need to break through to the core chamber." Kale looked at her. "Take me there." Alara's eyes widened. "Kyle, that place is unstable. If you go in—" "I know," he said quietly. "But the core only shuts down from the inside. And I know how." Alara stared at him, pain flickering in her eyes. "You'll die in there." Kale stepped closer, his voice calm. "Not if you come with me." She blinked. "Me? You know the core structure better than anyone. And I won't make it without you." The moment hung between them, fear, courage, unity. Alara nodded finally. "Then we go together." They rushed to the dropship. Mira joined them, piloting the small craft through the war zone toward an opening Kale had identified. The dropship dodged beams of light, exploded drone parts, and debris from damaged ships. When they reached the opening, Kale and Alara jumped out onto the metal platform leading inside. The Maw core interior pulsed with energy. Red wires crawled along the walls like veins. The air hummed with electricity. Kale pointed to a glowing pillar in the center. "That's the command node. If we overload it, the reclaimers lose control." Long. Alara began working on the panel while Kale defended her from incoming drones. He fought fiercely, striking with skill and focus. The node began to spark. "Almost there," Alara shouted. A massive surge of energy shot up the pillar. The entire fortress trembled. Drones froze mid-air, their eyes flickering. Kale grabbed Alara. "Run." They sprinted to the dropship as the core collapsed behind them. Mira dragged them aboard and pulled the ship away at full speed. A giant explosion erupted. The Maw core imploded, sending shockwaves across space. Every reclaimer ship in the area shut down, falling silent. The battle ended. The fleet erupted in cheers. Officers cried. Soldiers embraced. For the first time in centuries, the reclaimer cycle was broken. Kyle stood beside Alara on the deck, watching the light fade. Alara looked at him softly. "You did it." Kale shook his head. "We did it." She smiled, tired, relieved, hopeful. He rested a hand over hers. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." Alara nodded. Together. And as the stars shimmered around them, the galaxy entered a new age, one shaped by a human warrior reborn, and the guardian who had waited for him across the centuries.